Hey, how's it going? And welcome to this week's Music Production Explained weekly Q&A live stream. Really excited for this one. We're going to go in and talk a little bit about breakdowns, but we're also going to take some questions from the Facebook group. We've got a couple of questions there to dive into, so really excited to get into that with you. First thing I'm going to mention, a couple of weeks ago now, I put out a course called Ableton Accelerator. This was a 2-part release. Part 1 was a quick start course. So if you're interested in learning how to make dance music in Ableton Live and you've got maybe half an hour to give it a go, this is the perfect introduction for you. You're not going to learn bad habits. You're not going to be overwhelmed by stuff that you don't need to know. It's just going to be a really nice, quick introduction. Going on to the full course from there is the next natural progression, which people have been taking and people have been getting massive results from. So if you want to check that out, it's theaudiojourney.co.uk/quick start. Would highly recommend having a look at that. Awesome. So what we're going to talk about this week is breakdowns. So let's give you my screen here, and let's just double check that you can hear what's going on here. Hey Ruru, yes, I do remember you from the last Q&A. Ruru, who does remixes, if I remember rightly, was here last week. We've got another repeat appearance. Really good to have you here. Thanks for being here. So let's just double check that you're able to hear what's coming from Ableton. So if you wouldn't mind just letting me know whether you can hear this beat. There we go, she should be hearing that okay. Give me a shout if you're not. But what we're going to do is have a little listen through to this breakdown and see what sort of gives it impact. So let's have a listen through. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on there. It's a really quite minimal, simple breakdown. One of the things that I do is take the kick drum out. That's quite an obvious one to do in a breakdown, and it really does give the listener a clue that something has changed. So that is almost always worth doing, or just putting a filter on your kick drum. So if I didn't want to take the kick drum out, I could come in and grab an auto filter or an EQ, switch this and just take the low end out of the kick drum, so it would sound like this. And then when I take it off, so that's an effect that people use quite a lot, so you can automate that coming on and off. And at any point, if you do have any questions about this, chuck them into the chat and I'll be more than happy to answer those for you. So that's one thing that you could do with the kick, but instead I just take it out. We've got this short riser. Let's have a listen to that. Super simple, but it just bridges the gap. As we explained in the previous video, I've got the resonators on here which do some funky stuff to this loop. Feel free to go and check out last week's video if you want a bit more information on that. But there's a couple of things that I think I could do to this to make it more effective. First things first, just the last thing that I've done to make this what it is, I've taken out for the last 1 bar, I've taken out loads of these loops, pretty much all of the percussion elements apart from that weird percussion, which is almost like the lead. So everything except for that comes out for the last bar, including the bass. So just have a little bit of a listen to what that does, because I think it's a really cool effect. there we go. So I think that has a really cool effect. There's a couple of things, though, as I say, that I think I could do to make this a more effective breakdown. First things first, I've already used this plugin in this tutorial. It's an auto filter. So I'm going to drag this onto the drum bus. Now the drum bus is processing all of the drums. All of these audio tracks are coming through this audio track. So when I put this auto filter on, if I solo just the drum bus, I'm going to play around with this auto filter and then have a listen. And then in the track. There you go. You can see how that sort of adds suspense. Cool. So Chutney has asked a very good question. Can you please give a bit of info about the glue compressor? Absolutely. So a glue compressor, which is what you can see just down here on the bottom left of my screen, shouldn't really, it doesn't need to be as confusing as it might sound. So I'm going to bring this up here. A glue compressor is modeled on an analog compressor, or a fairly specific type of analog compressor. So when you see the big mixing desks in studios, one of the most famous brands to make those is a brand called SSL, or Solid State Logic. They make the big mixing desks that still get recorded through today, but were what you had to use to record back in the day. All of those audio tracks, you had the option to punch in this glue compressor. So these SSL desks had, I think it was an E series and a G series. This is completely unimportant. This is just for context. These old mixing desks had this compressor that you had the option to punch in. This glue compressor is just a normal compressor. There is, I mean, myself, admittedly, if I had to do a blind listening test between Ableton Live's standard compressor and the glue compressor, I really don't think I would hear a difference very easily at all. So that's the crux of it, really, is it doesn't make a massive amount of difference. The attack times and the release and the way that the compressor reacts has been modeled on this old famous compressor. And the reason that people call it a glue compressor is because you typically, because of the way that this desk was designed, you typically put it on your mix overall, and it helps glue the elements together. And any compressor can really do this. Glue compression as a technique is really just applying compression overall to try and make everything sound a little bit closer together. So if you've got hi-hats and bits of percussion, adding a compressor can make them all sound like they're a bit closer together, like in the same kind of space. There isn't really a huge amount more to it than that. It's got slightly different controls to what the standard compressor has in Ableton Live, but not very much difference at all. So the long and short answer, you're not going to notice the difference until you get really, really trained in audio engineering and you have a very good ear, which is not the kind of stage that I'm at. And glue compression is just gentle overall compression that you apply to your mix. I hope that clears that up for you. Cool. Let's have a look. Ruru said, I know this has nothing to do with beats. But I am staying free music production because could you talk about how you made your Ableton Live course? Yes. So your question in the group was about how I made my Ableton course. So yeah, let's dive into that. So as I said in the comment, it comes down to a couple of things. First thing is video production. Let's have a back and forth here. So I'll ask you some questions about where you're at with it. You can add your replies into the comments, and then we can make this a little bit more tailored to you. So there are sort of two elements to creating an online course. So for context, let's just show you what my Ableton course sort of looks like. let's go to the audio. Can't even spell my own business name. Okay, so this is the website. Let's have a look at the courses. I wonder if I can, actually, if I go through Kajabi, I'll get this up on here and we'll be able to see products, Ableton Accelerator. Okay. So here we go. This, let's get that off. So what we've got here is Ableton Accelerator. This is my online course. You can see that if you come through here, you've got a bunch of videos. Click on these videos and then you can go through and watch them. Pretty standard stuff. The background of your track. Okay. So, as I say, there's a couple of elements to making an online course. This is the end result that you're looking for, a set of videos that people can go through at their own pace and learn from. So, as I say, a couple of elements to that. One is video production. Ruru, if you let me know what sort of where you're at in terms of video production, can you make videos that are screen capture only, that capture the computer's audio, yeah, I guess what is it that you're looking to teach would be a good start. So let me know what you're looking to teach and how you're looking to teach it, whether it's videos using sort of screen sharing, videos talking to the camera like I'm doing now. It'd be good to know what you're looking to do. So the video production side of things is, yeah, finding out how is going to be best to teach the content. Generally, that's going to be a video course. But as I say, those two distinctions there, you can maybe use a combination of them, is using screen capture, which is what I would be doing if you were seeing this and then talking over the top of it. That would be screen capture, whereas this is what people tend to call talking head. So talking head footage is just me looking at the camera and talking to you. There's a combination of both of those inside this course. So if you want to do the video side of things, the talking head side of things, you need a camera, which your iPhone will be good enough. What I would look to improve is your lighting. Just get some softboxes from Amazon, which is what I'm using now. I've got a softbox up here and a little cheap LED light up here. It's a 2-point lighting setup. And audio. I've got a Shure SM7B here. Doesn't need to be that good, but if you're hearing crappy phone audio, people aren't going to be very impressed with it, especially if they're paying for an online course. So make sure the audio quality is decent. Video quality is actually the least important. Using any kind of like phone that you've got will do the trick for you. But a DSLR will obviously up the quality of that. I'm using the Canon M50 here, which is a really popular camera for that. It's got great autofocus, which is great when you're just filming yourself. So screen capture side of things, there's a couple of ways you can do that, and that depends really whether you're using Mac or PC. If you're using Mac like I am, then ScreenFlow is absolutely the way to go. Super easy to capture your screen, capture a webcam at the same time, capture your voiceover, capture the audio coming from your computer, and then ScreenFlow's got a really easy editor that you can compile everything in. If you're using a PC, then I don't actually use a PC myself, so I can't directly comment, but Camtasia is an alternative that's often talked about in the sort of Mac versus PC. ScreenFlow and Camtasia are the two options there. So Camtasia if you're on a PC, ScreenFlow if you're on a Mac. So we've got a couple of replies from Ruru here. So you're looking to teach music production using screen captures and talking videos. I have a camera. Looking to learn what software you used. Okay, cool. So if you're okay with the video production side of things, let me know if you have any questions on the video production side of things, how you edit, how you capture stuff, how you make that work. Happy to talk about that, but it seems more like it's the course side of things. So video production is first part, and then course creation, publishing, hosting. I'll call that course creation. that's the second part, and the biggest kind of decision that you have to make here is how you want people to find you. So the two options are going to be self-hosting or a marketplace. Self-hosting versus a marketplace. And I guess the way that you would describe the difference between these two is either if I wanted to sell my Mac laptop, for example, if I wanted to sell my laptop, I could either go to a marketplace where people are already shopping and already searching for things, like eBay. So I could sell my Mac on eBay, or I could make my own website and put it up for sale there using PayPal, using some sort of selling thing. In that second instance, I would have to drive people there myself. People aren't naturally browsing my website. I'd have to drive them there myself. So the decision ultimately comes down to how much of an audience you have. So if you have an audience that you can drive to your website, then self-hosting gives you a lot more control. You can charge more. You don't have to opt into discounts that marketplace might give. You don't have to pay as much of a fee. But if you are self-hosting, then no one is going to organically find you. You have to drive traffic there, otherwise you're not going to get any sales. The option of being in a marketplace in terms of online courses would be putting your courses somewhere like Udemy, somewhere like Skillshare, where you don't have a massive amount of control, but Udemy people are going to be finding your course on Udemy organically. So that is what I would recommend if you don't have an audience. So if you don't have an email list, a YouTube channel, people that already listen to you that you can say, go and check this out. If you don't have that, look at a marketplace. Whereas if you already have an audience, maybe look into self-hosting. So the self-hosting options are going to be Kajabi, which is what I use. That's definitely a higher end thing. It starts, it's not cheap, Kajabi, but that is sort of the creme de la creme of self-hosting. Cheaper options are Teachable and Thinkific. On the marketplace side of things, Udemy and Skillshare are the main ones that I can think of. Then there are other people like Groove 3? There are loads of different sort of small companies that make their own online courses or have subscription models. So you could look to maybe get your course featured on one of those. So yeah, be really interested to hear what you think about all of that, whether that answers your questions. And if you have any more specific questions about the course creation, then I'd be more than happy to help. But essentially, make the videos and then decide if you're going to self-host it or whether you're going to put it on a marketplace. A combination of the two might work. It's something that I'm exploring. Currently, I self-host my courses. I use Kajabi, so I have to drive traffic there. But that means that when I sell one of my courses, I pay a tiny fee on Stripe, which is the payment processor. But apart from that, the money's mine. Whereas if one of my courses sold organically through Udemy, I only get to keep 50% of that sale. So that's the kind of difference that you're working with when you're self-hosting versus using a marketplace. I hope that's helpful for you. Cool. We've got some questions from Chutney. Sir, please could you tell me the list of different elements or ingredients in a track like drums, melodies, chords, bass, and other ingredients? Sometimes I just don't know what a particular sound is. And because of this, I can't make the effect or I can't search how to make it. And it always feels like something's missing, but I don't know what. Yeah, that's a really good point. So have you seen the arrangement recipe live stream that I did? I would imagine you have from the terminology that you're using in terms of ingredients. But that's a really good point. In the course that that I made here, not wanting to tout the course too much, but this genuinely isn't something that I've seen taught elsewhere. There's an entire section of the course here called Learn the Sounds. So I walk through examples of drums and percussion, bass, leads and stabs, pads and atmospheres, risers and effects. I really don't hear it spoken about very often at all. that's why I wanted to include it as part of this course. And yeah, it's something that once you've been told, it does make sense. But in terms of picking it up on your own, it does take a little bit of time. So as you may have seen in the live stream that we did, let's see if I can find the track. No, let's not save that. I went through and mapped out a track and then came up with that list of ingredients. In terms of knowing what these are, it is a case of learning these by watching tutorials and sort of figuring these out. But yeah, that's why the section is in the course, because it's not the easiest thing to learn, but potentially this could be another YouTube video. How did we get on with this? I can't actually remember. Okay. So yeah, as I say, it's something that isn't very often taught, and I think that should definitely change. So if there's if there's a certain I think this would be really helpful to cover in a video itself. So something that I did as part of this course, which I could maybe recreate for YouTube, is this first video. I go through a track that I've made, and I go through each of the elements, because there's an example of pretty much each of the elements, or at least categories of elements in this track, and I go through those bit by bit. So maybe that's something that I can make available for YouTube. So if that's something you would like to see, then definitely let me know. Thank you for the question. Liam has asked a question. Follow-up question to earlier: is it a good idea to set a general time limit on a track to avoid endless tweaking? That's a really good question. It's something that I've sort of experimented with over time, and I'm still trying to find the right answer. But I think the best answer that I've come up with for that is the arrangement recipe that we went through a couple of live streams ago. The idea of an arrangement recipe is you do what we were just looking at. You map out what happens in a track in 8-bar sections, 8 or 16-bar sections, whenever things are changing. That does require you to have a little bit of an understanding of what drums are, what risers are, what pads are, what stabs are, which, as I say, I will be covering in a future video. That seems like something that is necessary. But you often get caught up in, I find I get caught up in a couple of different stages. Number one, knowing whether I've got enough elements to fill out a track. That's the first stage I get stuck in. And number two, knowing if the arrangement is engaging enough or interesting enough. And that is something that this arrangement recipe solves, both of those questions. First things first, once you map out a track 8 bars by 8 bars, it's not the most fun part of music production, but this gives you a template to say, right, these are all the things that they've used. If I make those and follow the same arrangement, but with my own sounds, then I know that this structure works because I like this track and I know that it's engaging. So once you've made all of the elements or ingredients on that list, you know that you've got enough to make a full track. And that answers question number one, do I have enough elements? Cool, so you can move on to number two, and then it's essentially painting by numbers. You've done the work up front to map out your arrangement. You literally just need to fill in the bricks, painting by numbers. As I say, I think this is a really, really easy way to work in terms of doing arrangements. I say easy in inverted commas. It's still, like, music production isn't easy by any stretch of the imagination. It's so subjective. But I think that answers the question of, am I ready to move on to the arrangement? And then, am I done with the arrangement? Is it engaging enough? As long as you've got automation sort of smoothing out the difference between the sections, you know that the basic makeup of those sections works. Endless tweaking, one of the best mentors I've ever had in terms of electronic music production has been a chap called Keith Mills. He runs a program called Finish More Music. And as you can guess from that title, this is what he specializes in, knowing when you finish something and helping you finish more and better music. So what he recommends is something called the 70% rule. When it comes to anything to do with music production, something that you're EQing versus an arrangement that you're trying to perfect versus a track that you're trying to finish, if you think that it's 70% of your best, or of your current ability, that's it, 70% of your current ability level, move on. So that's a really good question to ask yourself. Do the arrangement recipe in those two stages, and then at the end say, is this 70% of my current ability? If so, well done, you've finished your track. Hopefully there's a couple of useful little sort of nuggets in there for you to take away. I've tried to apply it using Disclosure Ecstasy. Yeah, I've seen that the album cover, I think, is the one with Eric Thomas. Does the vocals for one of them on there. The guy that was on When a Fire Starts to Burn, the kind of motivational speaker, Eric Thomas. He's absolutely wicked. Oh, how weird is that? I've literally just opened... I've just opened my Spotify here, and Energy is the last track that I listened to. That, I can promise you that was not premeditated. You've seen yourself, you've obviously just asked that question. Oh, it's Energy, not Ecstasy, sorry. I thought that was a really strange moment. So yeah, and this is a decent tune. Let's have a look at these questions a little bit more. I had one question, 2 up from that as well. Where is it? Have they released their album? Oh, Ecstasy, yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think I did listen to that actually. I remember that album cover. Cool. Awesome. So let's have a look and see if there actually is any question in there. Cool. I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah. Piano and bass question. Let's go. I love both of those things, piano and bass. So yeah, hit me. Cool. Yeah, I thought that was going to be a really spooky moment, but it was a slightly different track. Let me double check the Facebook group to see what the other... I think we might have addressed the 2 questions now, but I'll double check that. We'll see. Okay, yeah, so I got the second question lined up. It was about getting piano to cutting, so like getting piano to cut through the mix kind of thing. I do actually have a track with a... Yeah, I think I have a house track with piano in it. Stop Falling in Love, that was it. Cool. Yeah, I'm just loading up a track now that I never actually finished. I can't remember what kind of state this is in either. But yeah, let's have a listen to this. Yeah, isn't mixed, but let's have a listen to this.
Day the night, oh baby, it's just you and I. Just give me a touch, don't wanna feel too much. 'Cause if I end up back in love, it's dangerous. Now I can't get enough. Oh, I gotta stop.
So, this section of piano and bass still definitely needs a little bit of mixing. This song is by no means mixed. This is just like a rough thing to record over. But let's actually screen share this for you and have a quick listen just to this chorus bit. So the bass is following exactly the same pattern as the root note of the chords. So let's have a look. Oh, I can't even remember what chords these are, to be perfectly honest, but the MIDI thing will tell us. D minor, C major, B flat, G minor. So the chords should be, the notes should be D, C, yeah, B flat, G. Cool. Yeah, you can see actually for the bass, literally all I've done is copied the chords up and deactivated all of the other notes apart from the root note, which is exactly how I got those to sort of handshake and work. Work so nicely together, in my opinion. So one tip that I would have is use a decent piano sound, and one of the best that I've found is this Korg M1 plugin. You may well have heard of the Korg M1. You'll be going through this Korg M1 plugin, and you'll play a certain preset and be like, oh, that was that song from the 80s, and play the next one and it'll be like, oh, that was that song from the 80s. This was used on countless records, the actual physical Korg M1. This is just a plug-in replication, or replica, but yeah. When both are playing off each other syncopated, I think I know what you mean. Yeah, the M1 sounds absolutely wicked. Yeah, that's it. Do 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 do, baby, if you want me. Yeah, that's the classic Korg M1 sound, isn't it? I remember loading it up for the first time, being like, "Wow, that sounds so familiar." So I'm trying to think of examples of proper tracks that have that like syncopated pattern that you mean. Is it where sort of the piano's playing on the beat and the bass is on the offbeat? See if I can just make something this end that does that. I don't actually have the bass sound still loaded. Not having that. Hmm. Bass is playing in between piano chords. Guess something like trying to think of a song that actually does that. But MK has it. Let's just get. Cool, I've unmuted. Changed something there, haven't I? It's a difficult. It is a tricky one, and without any like solid examples, it's quite hard to say. The Yeah, it's really difficult to say without an example. I'm trying to think of some MK tunes that would do that. Cool, that's loud. Okay, that sort of had it. So, what he's kind of doing there is he's almost got two basses, and I'd have one. Yeah, having two kind of basses is the answer there. Where he's it's almost like a more subby bass that sits underneath the chords, and then there's the one that plays in the gaps, as you say, in those kind of syncopated places. Having the one that's much lower down, when I say lower down, the cutoff is probably going to be lower, and it's going to follow the root note of the chords. That just gives coherence across the frequency spectrum. What you're going to be looking to do for the one in between, which is the ones that I think you're talking about, is you're going to be processing them differently. So that's where you might open up the cutoff. You might take some of the low end out so that you can experiment with adding a bit of reverb or a delay. That's where you can make those sort of syncopated ones stand out. The way that I would do that is I would duplicate the track down, and then make those adjustments. And then where you want those sort of second ones to play, have those on the second track and leave the bass, the standard bass, uninterrupted on the first track. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So essentially just play around with processing and the cutoff filter. And that should get you like a nice sort of part B almost to your bass, that you can use in those little syncopated sections. So there you go. I hope that's helpful for you. And thank you very much for the question. That was a good one. We sort of got there in the end. But yeah, I look forward to an example that you can find. So, a last question came from Kyle on Facebook, and he said, "What is your go-to when you're feeling uninspired / down about a life circumstance? How do you pull together and find that something to get yourself up and making music when your mind and body is telling you not today?" I know this is an open, vague question, but I await your response with anticipation. Cool. So essentially, when you're uninspired to make music, how do you get around it? The generic cliche advice is generic cliche advice because it works. I'm going to try and add a little bit of a spin to it, a little bit of nuance, but essentially, certain things just work. Number one, taking a break. Let's try and add a bit more context to that. So if you have been banging your head against a wall trying to make a tune and you're getting frustrated with it, you feel like you've plateaued with it and it's just not going where you want it to go, do something else. Like, you need to put your head in a different place. Last night, for example, was not feeling making videos or doing anything creative. I watched a film and it just put me in a completely different headspace, and that's so valuable. Even if you don't take anything from that new place, it gives you a break and refreshes you. I'd recommend getting outside for that if possible. Watching a film is fine. Obviously, we're in global lockdown, but getting outside, doing something, talking to other people, just taking your mind off of it for a little while absolutely works. Secondly, I've noticed this myself quite a lot during the quarantine, actually, is self-care. So if you are staying up late, not getting enough sleep, if you are, for me personally, if I'm using computers until I go to bed, until like 2-3 minutes before I go to bed, the last thing I do is check my phone and then I try and go to sleep. Doesn't really work, and I don't feel particularly rested when I wake up. Whereas if I take the last hour of the day to wind down, just have like a little nightlight on, do some reading before I go to bed, I sleep much better. And then when I wake up in the morning, because I will have got a good night's sleep, I went to bed at a decent time, I'm up at a decent time, it puts you in a much better headspace. Meditation is something that everyone can benefit from. You know, the way that Sam Harris, who's a fantastic meditation teacher, described it to me, in not personally, but through one of his pieces of content, was that 60-70 years ago, it was an alien concept going out for a run. You know, if you said you were going out for a run, the reply would be, who's chasing you? Like, we didn't understand the concept of exercising our body. There were adverts for cigarettes. Doctors would advertise cigarettes saying they were healthy. We massively underestimate, or just had no concept of training our bodies to make them healthier and stronger. And the same thing is coming about of the mind at the moment. Our experience of life is all filtered through our mind, and we do absolutely nothing to train it on a day-to-day basis. Meditation is one answer to that. One of the most effective that I've personally found. Being able to manage your emotions a little bit better means that you are just going to be in a better headspace, and that can only be good for your creativity. So self-care in terms of eating properly, getting enough sleep, getting some sunlight, getting some social interaction, and, training your brain through something like a mindfulness meditation practice or some kind of brain training is going to make you more creative. You're going to be accessing more of your brain. Your brain's going to be in better shape. It's going to be fine-tuned. That absolutely helps me. They're my two go-tos, really, is taking a bit of a break, getting some separation from it, and then also making sure that you're looking after yourself. It's common sense, but it absolutely works. So I hope that's helpful for you. Cool. Chutney says, so when I'm unable to make particular types of melodies, when I'm unable to make a particular type of melodies sound, how to fix that? It becomes very overwhelming. If you could just show a bit that I'm talking about. Let's see if I can find that. It's not letting me copy that. Let's have a look. The answer is likely going to be something like presets or samples. Just finding that sound, isolating it, and using it in your own track is probably going to be a decent answer for this. But let's type this in. SER. Okay, let's have a listen. Okay, so there's a couple of different things going on there. It's kind of a layered lead. One of them is just kind of bleepy, the do 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 do, but there's then almost like a textural layer under there, which is probably a sample. In terms of finding these things, what I would say, pick a synthesizer, a software synthesizer. My recommendation would be Serum. But if you use something like Massive or Diva or Silent, whatever it is, make sure it's a fairly popular one. The reason that I say fairly popular one is because lots of people make presets for them. Either that or something to do with Native Instruments like Contact. But I would recommend getting one of those synthesizers, learning about how it works, and then there are so many preset packs available for those. And you can audition what the sounds sound like. That's how you're going to be able to find these sounds. I think that is the best way to go. Pick one of these popular synthesizers and you'll be able to find a preset pack that has sounds from your genre. They're going to be modeled on sounds like these because that's obviously what people want. So that's what I would look for. Cool. Gabriel says, do you know about guitar problems? Because I have a very annoying one. I'm sorry to hear it. I play a little bit of guitar. You can ask the question, but I'm not a guitar tech. I don't know a huge amount about guitars. So absolutely ask it. I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to help, but yeah, more than happy to have a go. Cool. PL Beat is back again. Really good to have you here. I'd like to ask about your vocal chain effect. What is the order? Cool. That's a good question. So it depends, but the way that I like to work, or the way that I like to structure it in my head, is the first thing that I want to even out is the massive differences in volume that you get across a vocal recording. So the way that I would do that is split it into individual clips where there's big differences and use the volume or the gain, clip gain in each individual clip to bring the volume up or down. This is before I've used an EQ, compressor, anything like that. So once I've evened out the volume using clip gain, I'll probably use volume automation to try and even out big spikes or big dips or put emphasis where I want certain words to pop. Again, this is before I've used any plugins. This is all quite manual work, but this, if you sat with a pop producer, they're going to be using loads of clip gain. They're going to be using loads of volume automation before they touch a plugin. The first plugin that I tend to use is EQ. It's a personal preference. There's an ongoing argument about it, but my sort of theory behind it is I don't want frequencies hitting a compressor if I don't want them in the vocal altogether. I tend to EQ before and after compression. EQ is just a tool that I use really liberally. So I'll try and even out the volume with clip gain and volume automation. You can do this in pretty much any DAW. Pro Tools is a really common one, but Ableton can do this, Logic can do this, they can all do this. Even out the volume, then EQ out the bits that I don't want in there. Compress to just keep the volume even. So this volume automation, clip gain and compression is just to keep the volume even and then add emphasis where you want emphasis to be. Then I would probably EQ again to accentuate anything that, or add emphasis to anything that I want to add it to. Then I'd be looking at a reverb, and just that's when it comes down to a stylistic choice. Do you want it to be kind of drenched in reverb, or do you want it to be a really clean sort of upfront vocal? And then delays, really, that's where I'd be looking, and maybe a little bit of saturation. At this stage, you can also look into maybe doubling. Highly recommend, if you're recording vocals, don't just have a single track recorded. Get the singer to layer up their takes. You can decide to use it or not, but more often than not, layering takes is going to make it sound much fuller. You can pan some certain ways, make it just a massive vocal take. So yeah, that's a little insight into my sort of vocal processing. Liam says, do you flip between mono and stereo when making a track, and is it important? Very good question. It's particularly important if you're making music for a club environment. If you're making dance music that you're intending to give to DJs, that you want DJs to play, club systems, when you go out to a club, will almost always be mono speakers. So if you've made a track that's got loads of panning and stereo effects, and you haven't listened to it in mono, there is a likelihood that you could listen to it in a club, or people could listen to it in a club, and it doesn't sound the same, because things like phasing can happen. The track is going to sound different in mono than it is in stereo if you're using a lot of stereo effects and a lot of panning. Easiest way to do this is put a utility in Ableton Live, put a utility which is in the audio effects, put that on the master fader, flick it between on and off. Let's go in and actually have a look at this. So if I was doing it for this track, what I would do is come to the master. I do have a utility on here, but I don't have it set to mono, so let's just grab a new one. Utility. Then what I would do, come up to this key, so press key or K. Actually, no, K. Does K do that? It's Command K, that's it. For key mapping. So what I'm then going to do is click on mono and press, I don't know, 1 on my keyboard. 3 actually, because I've already used them. And then whenever I press 3 on my keyboard, it's going to flip it into mono for me. It's a useful thing regardless of whether you're mixing for clubs. Clubs are just the most common example, but there are household speakers that will be playing stuff back in mono. So generally, it is good practice to make sure that your mix translates well into mono. If it doesn't, then it probably highlights that you've got an EQing problem that needs to be addressed because things are overlapping. I hope that's helpful. Cool. So thank you very much for answering my questions. Another question from Chutney. After exporting, the track becomes very punchy sounding. Sometimes I couldn't figure that out. Not too sure why that would be. I'd say look at your export settings and make sure that you're unchecking things like normalize, and that you've got overload protection and bits like that. So yeah, that's probably going to come down to your export settings. If you're uploading it to SoundCloud, SoundCloud processes your audio and basically downgrades it. So I don't really, especially if someone's sending me a track to review, I will never get SoundCloud links because they just destroy the audio essentially. So be conscious of that as well. Cool. So if anyone has any last questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. But if you don't, then I'm going to start wrapping up here. I wanted to give a final reminder about the Ableton Accelerator Quick Start course. If you're looking to learn dance music production and you just want to try out Ableton for half an hour, maybe you've tried to learn it before and found it intimidating, or maybe it's something you've always wanted to try, definitely check out the Ableton Accelerator Quick Start course by going to the audiojourney.co.uk/quick start. Cool. That's us wrapping it up for this week. Thank you very much to everyone that's been here on the stream. It's been really good to talk to you all and answer some of your questions. Same time, same channel next week. We'll be back here. There'll be another topic that we're going to talk through, and again, can take as many questions as you need. So again, thank you very much for being here. I hope you guys enjoyed the rest of your week. Take care.